Hello, everybody. My name is Vernon Church. I'm president of TruthCo, a brand and cultural insights consultancy to the television industry. And I'll be the moderator today for our panel on millennials and plurals and how they're going to be changing TV. Some of you may be wondering why a bald guy with more gray in his beard than brown is hosting something on millennials. It's because I have a great team of millennials who work with us, and they sat me down and educated me and chastised me and said don't embarrass them, and they're watching on streaming, so I have to be very good and be smart. And we also have this great panel of very, very smart people who will help us kind of crack the nut on what's going on with the future of television and plurals in this new generation. Having said the word generation, I want to start by setting some context and getting a little bit away from demographics and talking more about psychographics. Really what's relevant here is not whether people are plurals or millennials or whatever generation will come after that. It's really all about digital natives, because digital natives are a group of people who have never known a non-digital world, and they are a very, very different breed of individuals, and they're going to change a lot of things. These are people who probably before the end of their working careers will fly at hypersonic speeds to Beijing in 3 hours. They may go to outer space for entertainment. They hopefully will solve things like climate change and may very, very well finally make a legitimate attempt and succeed at engendering a post-racial society in America. So this is a very, very different group of people. Why are they so different? Because they've never known a non-digital, non-connected, non-disintermediated world, and that's changed everything about the way they look at things. There are people who are cord cutters, as we know. They're binge watchers. They're archivists. They like to dive in and look at a show that was on when their parents were kids and watch it all in 25 hours. They have the stamina for that still. And they are people who are really concerned about social justice. They're more concerned about social cred and what they see in social media, what they consume in social media, than they are about marketing and advertising. And that's pretty scary for those of us who are in the traditional, I'll still use the word traditional media industry, because it's just a whole different beast and a whole different type of demographic or, again, psychographic to approach. Fortunately, we have a great panel today, and I think they're going to help us be a little less scared about all that. So I'm going to start, before we get into questions, by having each one of them introduce themselves and tell you briefly about what they do.
Hi, I'm Melissa Drucker. I run brand partnerships and sales for Tastemade. We're a food and travel digital network that is geared towards millennials. Everything that we focus on is that generation who is consuming media through whether it's mobile or digital platforms, but we also serve them in a more traditional sense as well on things like Apple TV, Roku, and serving them in every aspect of a way that they can reach and want to be reached.
Hi, I'm Daniel Limburg. I'm Chief Digital Officer at Fusion. So I run content, social media, technology, product, and audience development at Fusion. And Fusion is also a media company targeting millennials in the US. We think about Fusion as essentially occupying the kind of intersection of three fundamental changes that we're seeing in America. Number one, the rise of an entirely new generation, the most populous generation in American history. Number two, the most diverse generation in American history. Gradually, the minorities becoming the majority of the country. And number three, a fundamental change in the way that people are producing, distributing, consuming, and monetizing content, where the mobile experience is really becoming the first touch point for most media. And so it's right at that intersection of those three things that Fusion was created. And so we are essentially a media company for a young, diverse, and connected generation.
Hi there. I'm Joetta Goble, Vice President of Research at Magid. And at Magid, I do a lot of qualitative research, but one of my primary interests is the generational framework and how it informs aspirations and goals and mindsets and expectations, and seeing that play out in the research we do. But I also have a background in cognitive science, and so understanding how like your previous experience shapes your expectations of the future and how you process the same information that another person sees is really an interest of mine, and I used that when I was at Nissan in advanced planning and strategy, where we did a lot of product development around that generational structure. So it's something I'm really passionate about, and I'm excited to be here.
I'm Kathleen Grace. I'm the Chief Creative Officer of New Form Digital. New Form Digital is a relatively new player in the world. We launched 18 months ago. We're a partnership between Ron Howard, Brian Grazer, and Discovery Communications, and we produce, develop, and create content for digital first distribution, and it's all scripted series.
Hi, I'm Tao Huang. I help lead the content syndication and licensing efforts at Defy Media. Defy is basically a leading creator of and distributor of millennial digital content, and we have a huge presence both on our own media assets as well as on partner sites. Over, I think, 60 million YouTube subscribers and 80 million social followers. Some of our brands that you may be familiar with, it's Smosh and Break, Clever, Screen Junkie, so a wide sort of portfolio of brands.
Right. I'll actually use this so Vernon can get back his murder mic here. Yeah, it's on, good. My name is Andre Swanton. I am the CEO and co-founder of True Optic. True Optic is really the first and still only measurement and programmatic advertising company that was built specifically for the over-the-top ecosystem. So we measure more census-level downloading and streaming of over-the-top media consumption than any other company in the world, and we use that to power everything from research for content planning strategies, concentration strategies, distribution in the OTT ecosystem, as well as audience acquisition targeting and kind of supply-side audience segmentation.
Great, thank you all. Let's start by level setting our discussion with examining the differences among the major generations that some of which we've stopped talking about, which being in one of those is a little bit concerning to me. But let's talk about the difference in viewing habits among boomers, Xers, millennials, and plurals. And if you want to throw millennials and plurals again together into digital natives, that's fine. But what are the main differences we're looking at? Who'd like to take a crack?
I mean, I'll start. Is this on? Oh, did I just turn it off? There we go. Okay. Well, I'll just go really quickly. I think that the aspect that I'm interested in that I want to speak to is kind of the differences in expectations and worldview that change how they respond to the existing environment. Because there is a thread of technology is always changing. Like, yes, it's digital now. Yes, it's fragmented now. But before we were worried about what color TV was going to do, and before we were worried, like, things are always changing. So what's interesting to me is how the different motivations and values and mindsets come together to shape the aspects they respond to and how they adapt it to their lives. So for me, I would say that what's most interesting, we'll go kind of backward, the plurals they're children of Gen Xers, which means that they are benefiting from, holistically speaking, they're benefiting from a sort of correction that Gen Xers are attempting to make where they felt that they were not quite as attended to and cared for during their childhoods. I'm speaking very generally on purpose. So they're looking to instill in their children the idea that I am here for you and I am present for you, but it's a different flavor than the boomer parents, because the boomer parents are saying I'm here for you and helping you all along the way, whereas the plurals, the Gen X parents, are saying, I'm here for you, but I'm also incredibly proud of my own abilities and independence and pragmatic nature, so I'm going to instill that in you too. So I think what we're going to see with plurals, and they're all under 18 now, so this is still forming, but I think what we're going to see with plurals is a mixture of a desire to have things that speak to them and a desire to reject anything that seems too generalized and too blanketing over things, and yet and combined with a very pragmatic approach to get that done. So if that means dumping that and switching to that and using the free trial of that and pirating that, I think that they're going to be much more open to that because they've been raised in that world of pragmatism, look out for yourself, you can't trust authority. Whereas, and I think that kind of, I won't talk about all four generations because I think it's similar to Gen X, but I do think also that with millennials, you see that we all talk about that customization and that sort of thing, and that really was about, and it plays in TV, where you are looking for things that speak to you as an individual. Don't talk to me as a generation. Talk to me as who I am, because I've been raised to believe that find my passions and explore them. So you speak to my passions and I will engage. And I think both of those things will influence how they engage with television content.
Andre, you look like you.
Yeah, I would say I think the main difference in terms of television viewing habits or how things are evolving is this expectation of control. Which I think speaks to some of the things that you mentioned. Before, with older generations, if you wanted to watch your favorite show that came on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m., you had to be at the TV on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Now, I mean, you can watch that show whenever you want. You can watch it the next day. You can watch it 3 months later. You can wait 9 months until it's on Netflix. So I think with these generations, and I have 2 small kids, 7 and 4, they can turn on the TV, and whether it's on their Wii or Roku or 5 other different ways on 5 different TVs, they can watch pretty much any show they want to watch whenever they want. So I think the expectation of control, one of the things that you also mentioned was, which is why whether it's millennials or plurals are even more open to piracy, one of the things that we're seeing is even with this access to content from a Netflix or Hulu, you're seeing digital piracy of television increasing double-digit percentage year over year. And I think it's just another way of people saying, well, if I want to watch it, I'm going to watch it.
But that's
the main
interesting.
difference.
Is there some different expectation about whether one should pay for content? Why has that happened? I mean, clearly, my parents' generation, they were, I guess they were the greatest generation. They would never consider stealing something. They would look at that as stealing and never even do it. Now I see people saying, well, I want to watch that show and I can get it for free over here, so I'm just going to do that without making that kind of moral or ethical, doing that analysis. Why is that? Why is that changed? Anybody?
Yeah. Oh. Sorry, I'm stealing your mic.
That's all right.
Just to that point, I have a almost 5-year-old, and it's the same thing. I think the generation, from a control standpoint, I don't think they know that it's wrong. You know, they've been raised in this environment where they get what they want when they want it, and it's accessible. So there's no distinguishing, well, I got it last week on Netflix or I got it here on Amazon. It just becomes a go-to and a methodical, everyday occurrence.
So I think that's absolutely right, and I actually wanted to add to the previous thing, because I think that conversation would be incomplete without taking into account the role that social media is playing in how content is, or how content is being discovered and consumed, and how people are engaging with these things across generations, and also the use of mobile. I think that when you talk, we're yet to see about plurals. I think how they're going to consume media, the platforms and the technologies and those things are not even with us yet. 3 years ago, Snapchat wasn't really in the picture, and now it's probably the most dominant, or one of the most dominant platforms for that generation. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that changing very quickly. But the role that Facebook and other platforms play in the way that this generation discovers content and relates to it is fundamentally different. I mean, there's no, as you were saying, there's no kind of clicking through these things. It's through your social connections. You want to watch the things that your friends are talking about or your friends are recommending. And so your friends have become the first layer of discovery for a lot of these things. And so I think that's a fundamental difference between how younger generations are finding content and the way that previous generations used to. And then the mobile. Now the screen is with you all the time on your phone. And so you can access a show, or you can access digital content, you can access the news, you can access anything from there, which is also a fundamental change in the way that you're consuming content. Now the content needs to be built for those things and for those platforms where people are finding it. And I think that's a fundamental difference, not only for the audience, but for us who are producing content.
But do we wind up in a strange situation where advertising supported content, which has been the past, makes people feel like content is free? I mean, they're spending their time on it, but they're not literally spending money on it. And so there are now generations that expect content to be free, but then on the other hand, they don't want to watch advertising anymore. So the industry is being squeezed from both sides. There's this idea of, well, yes, I shouldn't have to pay for that. On the other hand, I don't want to watch advertising.
I think you're mistaking the desire to watch something because it's free. they're not searching for it and pirating it because it's free. They're searching and pirating it because whoever distributed that piece of content didn't make it accessible to them. It's not about, I don't want to pay for this. It's, for example, for the brief moment I re-engaged with cable after not having cable for a decade, I spent 1 year and I was like, I'm going to give it a try. And I searched for the Mindy Project on the searching part of Time Warner Cable, and it brought up, the first thing it brought up was Mork and Mindy. The next day I canceled my Time Warner Cable because they could not help me find the one thing I wanted to watch. And so now I watch it on Hulu.
So
like, you just couldn't do it for me. And now I pay to watch it on Hulu.
So you're willing to, but you're willing to pay for it. So that
I will pay for it.
Right,
and in some ways, I like it better that I watch Walking Dead on iTunes than that I overpay for a cable subscription and pay for things I don't watch. I would rather spend more money watching the stuff I choose to watch and can find easily than muck about with all the crap that's on there.
And I think what adds on to that as well is the attitudes toward authority. I mean, Gen Xers and plurals are both coming into this with more generally a mindset of authority is not the thing to trust. They're not going to take care of me and protect me. So I'm not going to turn to you and say pirating is wrong. It's, well, you're not delivering what I want. I have to take care of myself. I'm going to get what I want. Whereas in millennials and boomers, you'll see a bit more of an attitude of, I am, especially millennials, I should say, a little bit more of a faith in authority because parents have been providing that mindset to them and delivering on that. And so there is a little, I think you're only going to see more and more of that flexibility of pay or not pay. It's not an unwillingness. It's not about getting it for free. Gen Xers were a little bit more about sticking it and getting it for free, but their kids are a little bit more about, like, if I can't pay for it, I will get it for free. I'm practical.
I think what I would add is the audience is really discerning and very knowledgeable. And what we have seen, for example, with Smosh, which has been around for 10 years, which is hard to believe. We all feel really old. But that audience is so loyal. And even if it's a new crop coming in, the culture that's created is such that, you know, when we have a full-length movie that they have to pay for, they go and pay for it. When we sell a digital game, that has proven to be the case. And as long as you have that strong relationship and you provide the content that the audience wants to watch, I mean, we have seen that. And with our new subscription service, Screen Junkies, which we just launched, they're coming and paying.
Yeah.
That's
and you don't even have to, the crazy thing is Smosh has, what, 10 million subscribers? I mean,
more like 35. Yeah, which is amazing.
They have
insane.
Tens of millions of subscribers. We had a series called Oscar's Hotel. We made it with a YouTuber who has 700,000 subscribers, much smaller than Smosh, but incredibly rabid audience, really high engagement scores on all of his analytics. And we released a transactional series on Vimeo On Demand where they had to pay $9.99 for the season. We set a single-day sales record for Vimeo on that first day of sales. But also, we sold T-shirts and posters and cool stickers and things to go with it. Our package that was $50 to get the poster, the T-shirt, everything, was our highest selling item. We made more money on merchandise than we did on selling the show. Like, because they want to show up and they will pay $50 for PJ Ligori's T-shirt to go with his show. They will, $50 is a lot for a 15-year-old kid. Like,
and that's deal. Great, and that's cause for hope, clearly. But what does that mean for advertising-supported networks and et cetera?
I'm seeing this firsthand. I came from BBC America on the cable side of selling advertisement and seeing how advertisers react, viewers react to things compared to now. And the demand and the way that brands can get involved now, I think, is so much more clever. I think people really appreciate it, especially the millennials. They love being given something that they weren't going to be given before. So they're thankful to an advertiser who does it right. And I think people need to start getting out of the whole 15-second, 30-second spot and make it more engaging. And, you know, we build a lot of content for brands where we build shows for the brand with their ethos, but give it in a way that we know our audience is going to love. So they're thankful for it and they want more and they turn to the brand for help versus just saying, oh my gosh, here it goes again, skip ad.
I mean, it goes back to that pragmatism. A 15-second pre-roll is stopping me from getting what I want. But a brand paying for Smosh or someone to make a series is enabling me to have more of the things I love. So I like that.
Which is really going back to the early days of television where brands sponsored shows rather than
or, you know,
advertised on them.
Help co-create them. And
they're not anti-advertising, I would say. I mean, it's not about I hate ads. It's about I hate the same Geico ad 7 times in the show. I mean, I hear this in all kinds of focus groups, and they'll say, oh, no, I understand the exchange I'm making, and I'm willing to make that exchange. And sometimes I see something that I wouldn't have known before, or I get access to something I wouldn't have had access to before. But sometimes, and younger generations, this becomes more important. It's like you don't even know who you're advertising to, and I want you to know who I am and speak to me. I'm in for that exchange. But you need to know who I am and speak to me.
Let's talk a little bit about content now. Is there a different sensibility in the, I'll use loosely the word quality, but quality is not quite what I mean, the type of content that people are willing to consume? So for instance, one of the things that's, the terms that's always thrown around about millennials is they want to have authentic experiences, whatever that means. Authenticity means something different to every person. Does that raise the bar? Does it change the bar in any way in terms of generationally the type of content that needs to be produced and presented to the digital natives versus everyone else beforehand?
I think just from a Tastemade perspective, you have to know the platform that you're serving the content on. You can't serve the same piece of content on an Apple TV that you're going to serve on Snapchat, because your audience isn't going to be open to it. So for us, we create 10-second clips, put them all together for original content on Snapchat's Discover platform. Facebook, we know people are scrolling through their feed. We want to grab their attention. They're 60 to 90-second clips. Apple TV, we know it's a binge watching experience. They're going to be longer form, 8 to 12 minute, but you have to know your audience and what platform they're working on to better serve them.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. We actually at Fusion have taken that even a step further. So we have the full range of distribution. We have a cable network all the way through Snapchat Discover channel, and everything in between, the Facebook, the YouTubes. We have all OTT platforms, smart TV, syndicated, Vessel, everything. And that's very true. And what we've done is we've created teams of experts that basically create content exclusively for the platform. So what you see, especially when you have a cable component attached to a media company, is everything is subservient to that. And you'll take a TV show and you'll clip it into a few minutes for YouTube and shorter for Facebook and even shorter for Instagram and all of that. We do none of that. We really create content very specifically for each one of the platforms. And what we try to do is create these vertically integrated brands that have an expression that is perfect for each one of the platforms, because the audience that you're going to find is slightly different. And the other point is to the authenticity. I think you're absolutely right. I think they just see through perfectly the kind of artifice of television, and they're looking for things that are far more intimate, far more authentic in that way. And that's why I think you're seeing the rise of the social influencers. It's a very direct relation. The panel right before us was all about that. It's a very intimate relation that they have and a personal contact. They feel like they know these people, and they often are in touch with them.
Just so we can stay on that for a little bit. What does that mean for network television versus cable versus OTT? Because there are different standards that apply. So I would imagine that if I were a millennial and I wanted something that was, again, more authentic, more realistic, I might watch network television and say, well, wait a minute, that's not that thing, because these two people just, they just hooked up and it's next morning and they're eating breakfast. What happened in between there? I know what happened, but I didn't see it. I turn on HBO and everything is there. And the OTTs, obviously, they're different standards, right? So, and I think, so how does a network that is constrained by FCC rules about what they can show on television at certain times compete in a marketplace that is now not a level playing field anymore?
I mean, I would say those are kind of very different, and I don't know that there's necessarily a competition between having a show like Scandal on ABC, and I don't care if it's the most popular Periscoper in the world, or YouTuber or blogger. It's just a very different experience, and there's this huge, I think, misperception that millennials don't watch television anymore. And I think was touched on earlier by the gentleman from ABC. It's not that they don't watch TV, it's that they're not watching linear television other than, say, sports. They're watching TV on their tablet, on their TV everywhere. They're, you know, on popcorn time, streaming stuff. So I think that there really doesn't have to be a competition. I don't think you should see the Viacoms and the NBC Universal start, you know, creating 1-minute shows to try to compete for that audience.
Right, but I don't think we should, I'm not saying you're doing this, but when I asked the question, I didn't ask it in the right way. We're talking a little bit about time. You know, this is a, you know, a 5-second video versus a 3-minute video versus a 30-second versus a show versus, that's not what I was trying to get at. What I was trying to get at is, does this desire for authenticity change the nature of the content that must be produced to attract millennials? I think that's...
Well, I think it's more about the voice of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone would really describe Empire as an authentic show. It's very broad. It's a soap opera, but it has a huge audience and is very compelling. It has an audience that is of all ages because it's aware of what it is. It does not lie to you and to pretend to be anything more than a really well-written, well-executed soap opera. And so it's very, in its tone and the writing and the dialogue and the stories, clear about what it is.
It's authentic within the
which is authentic within the context of a soap opera. You know, it's self-aware. And so I think it goes back to your point, which is this audience is very smart about media. And the thing I use, and you probably know a lot more about this than I do to explain this to people, is like, this audience has literally never had a world where they could not touch and click something and find out more. And so literally their brains work differently than ours. They consume media faster. They understand stories faster. That's why you see a show like Empire, which has incredibly different narrative structure than a soap opera 10 years ago. It moves faster. The plot lines that happen in Empire in one episode would have taken 4 weeks to play out on Dynasty. Like, seriously. I mean, you go get a drink from your kitchen, you come back, and they've, like, the kid and the stepmom slept together, and you're like, when did that happen? They move faster because this audience has a very sophisticated understanding of storytelling because they are storytellers. They're making their own Snapchats, they're making their own YouTubes, they're on Twitter, they're on Vine, they're on Periscope. So they're way more sophisticated than my parents, my grandparents, even my brother who's only 9 years older than me and he's Gen X, you know? It's just different.
And I don't think authenticity and sort of like grit and reality are the same thing. I think that authenticity gets used as a word, but the way I kind of think about it for millennials is it's less about telling the dirty truth and showing everything, and it's more about reflecting the attitude and environment under which they were raised, which was each of you has something special. Find your passion. And I mean that in a positive way. I know that gets described negatively, but each of you has something special. Find what makes you happy. I will support that and nurture that. And I think that authenticity piece is more about understand that I view the world that way. Not me, but as a millennial, I view the world that way. And you need, if you're going to be authentic with me, it means you're going to understand that each of us has something special. And you're going to speak to those things and not treat everyone like they're following one specific script.
Yeah, I think the one area where they are frustrated is when we try to sort of not serve the storytelling. So, for example, it has to be 22 minutes or it has to be 22 episodes, so you're just going to drag out that story. I think they're, again, because they grow up and they've grown up in this environment of following the, I guess, the authentic story. So if it's a 4-episode, if it's a 15-minute skit, if it's, you know, whatever length and format it needs to be, I think they're very cognizant of that, and they respond very quickly when it seems like it's sort of jammed into a structure that no longer serves, you know, kind of the story.
That's great. Someone touched on, maybe it was Kathleen, about instant access to information at all times. And what does that mean for, so what does that mean for second screen interactions? I I'm a boomer, and I simply never watch television without at least one other device, if not two, in my lap, so I can play the "How old is so-and-so" game, or whatever it is that I want to play when I see somebody on television that I want to learn more about. So what is, if I'm interested in second screens, I got to believe millennials are interested in second, third, and fourth screens, or iPhones, or iWatches, or whatever device they happen to have strapped to them. How important is that for success on television? Or maybe it's not.
I believe it's actually a lot less important now than it was 3 years ago. And that's because the second screen is now the first screen, right? For when you're talking about millennials, it's not that I'm watching my Comcast cable box and talking on Twitter as much as it is I'm watching what I would have been watching on my Comcast cable box, on my laptop, on my tablet, on my Roku.
So second screens were required because first screens were inadequate to the task. So if you use the second screen for everything, then then you're good. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think that you might see an opportunity in two things. One is live viewing, and then personalization, right? I think the second screen can get very interested if I can watch a game and pick the point of view that I'm going to watch a play, or go back and watch a play, on my own, or ask for a replay or anything like that, and I can participate, I can comment, I can have an active experience. I think outside of live viewing experiences, that's just incredibly difficult, and so I think there's probably an opportunity for some personalized kind of viewing around live viewing, but I think it's a relatively limited opportunity, I think.
Got it. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about diversity. Diversity means very different things for different generations. I think for boomers, it was anything that wasn't white, male, and heteronormative was diversity, and it could have been stereotypical. It was still perceived as diversity. And then Gen Xers wanted to get beyond stereotypes and have diversity that was somehow more meaningful. But we're in a world now where one generation's sports hero is a new generation's gender identity icon. What does it mean for diversity in programming? What does it do to the requirements of the content that's produced?
Well, I think.
And how would you define? I'm sorry. And how would you define diversity? People always talked about multiculturalism, but that always suggests it's pushing against a culture.
Yeah.
Omniculturalism, which we like to talk about now at TruthCo, is more about there not being a center anymore.
Right.
So what does that mean for a program?
Right. I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly why the Walt Disney Company and Univision founded Fusion, because they were seeing that there is no longer that kind of norm, that the diversity is being redefined, that the country looks incredibly different, that these generations look incredibly different, that the categories that we were asked to check on our census no longer make sense, and so it's complicated. And I think that what it means for us is, we are trying to build a company that represents that diversity, where the people that work at the organization represent that diversity, the people you're going to find in our programming represent that diversity, the ideas that you're going to find represent that diversity, and we think that that's the future.
I was going to say pretty much the exact same thing. From a programming content standpoint, I think not only should the people in the videos, in the content, reflect that diversity, but it's also going outside, I think, just the U.S. Tastemade's a global company. We have talent around the world, and I think bringing that to the audience is really helpful too, getting the different voices from a authentic, again, back to that word, authentic point of view that's not faking what they're trying to say is really important too.
And I also think it presents a challenge to the TV industry, and specifically advertising, in the sense of as you move away from assumed norms, because you could assume with a pretty safe bet in an earlier generation that, oh, an 18 to 35-year-old woman who has children is like this. And that is no longer the case. And so the way you have to think about targeting advertising and communicating messages and speaking to who people are within a TV environment is not, it's more complicated. And I think that's another aspect of diversity that changes things.
Let's talk a little bit about brand loyalty. Is there any such thing anymore in the entertainment industry? Does it mean anything? I can remember my parents watching one network. They would watch, they'd turn it on at 6 and watch it to 11, go to sleep, and that was it. I had the perhaps misfortune or good fortune, it depends how you define it, of having 700 channels, none of which most of which I couldn't watch, so there were probably 5 networks that I watched. I recently cord cut, so I downloaded the apps for those 5 networks, which is what allowed me to do that, because I didn't feel like I was missing anything. In a world where so let's examine the premise first. Is there any such thing as brand loyalty anymore in television, number one? And number two, if not, what does it mean for repetitive viewing and all those other good things?
So I would say there's a lot of loyalty when it comes down to specific titles and content, or people's interest or behavior in terms of consuming specific genres of content. There's a ton of loyalty. So, I mean, we've analyzed tens of billions of downloads and streams, and you can see that it's the same households that are watching action-adventure content. Now, whether that's HBO or it's Fox or it's some channel you've never heard of that has some show, you know, oh, wow, this is spiking relative to this genre. But what I don't think is you're not going to see as much of people saying, I'm just going to watch whatever's coming on Fox, or I'm just going to watch whatever's coming on HBO.
Yeah, and I think in part that's because the reason brand loyalty works is that it's a human nature thing. We have positioned brands as people, and human brains are evolved to identify and resonate and connect with people. And so the brand loyalty is shifting. It's not because where are the personalities coming from? The personality is coming less from the network or the channel, and the personality is coming more from the content in a lot of cases, combined with the many different ways people are accessing things, where it's often not within the context of a larger personality of a network or show, network or channel or that type of thing.
I think I see that point, but I would also say I do think there is brand loyalty. I know that just for myself, you know, you're watching Homeland on Showtime. I'm more apt to watch The Affair coming on next because I trust Showtime. I love the content they're pushing out. Whereas, you know, I might not do the same on a different channel that I am not loyal to. And I think the same holds true for a bunch of really great networks, whether they are subscription-based models like an HBO, Showtime, but I mean FX, AMC, they've proven to the audience that they create great content. And I think that it all comes back to that content piece is if you serve an audience with great stuff, they're going to be loyal. I mean, we have it with Tastemade too. But you have to listen to your audience and you have to see what they're responding to and what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't mean to argue brand loyalty would go away. I actually, sorry, I'm going to disappoint. I think that's a really good point. There are networks or content producers or whatever that are doing that and are achieving a personality. Like if you tell me it's an HBO show, I have a personality in mind. If you tell me another, I'm not going to pick any channels, but then I might not have that same personality. And when I can connect to it as a person or sort of can predict its behaviors, I'm more engaged and I can still feed that loyalty.
I think there's another really interesting aspect to the loyalty conversation, which is your online persona and the things that we put out there. That we tell the group of friends on our social networks that we like. And that's important because we are very mindful about the brands that we associate with. I think that there's a certain weight to that. People like to share content from companies that they feel a certain affinity from, that they feel represent their values, and they're less likely to do that if they don't feel that about that company. Even if the piece of content might have been compelling, they might consume it but not share it. And so I think there's a very important layer that's coming into play with the kind of brand affinity that people want to kind of put outwards to the world. And I think that that's very important too.
Yeah, if I could interject. You know, I think we've definitely seen that. I mean, our research group spoke to the attendees of VidCon and spoke to teenagers online. And I mean, we've definitely seen that digital stars are, you know, kind of much, much more popular than traditional TV celebrities. And so important to that is because I think the relationship and what a brand is evolving. So back to Smosh, again, they are two stars, Ian and Anthony, but Smosh is a brand. And when it introduces a new show or a new product, similar to a network, it comes with a stamp of approval and the audience follows. And I think so it's just more the evolution of what a brand is. I mean, we feel strongly, I mean, the loyalty is definitely there, and it's just more, how do you communicate and how do you relate to the audience about a brand?
That's great. So just briefly, I'd like to, before giving you each a chance to give us one take-home about this new native, digital natives. If you don't have anything, that's fine too. This is a surprise question. But let's talk about business models. What does this mean? You know, journalism went through this tremendous change in business models because you used to be able to have 1,000 people working in your newsroom because you could get $200,000 for an ad in your newspaper. Now that there's so much ad inventory in the online space and everything else, you can't support a giant newsroom anymore, which is why many media companies, news media companies, are struggling. I think in some sense, there's a little nipping at that model, the ad-based model for network television and anything else going on out there, because there's so much more inventory, which means it's less, you get less smaller CPMs, we'd say, in the web world for it. So what does it mean for the business model? Where does it go? I mean, at the end of the day, you have to keep the lights on. How do you make money in this new environment?
I think it's all about the shifting of a mindset from a brand. I think that the publishers are there. I think it's just getting away from the traditional idea that advertising was always meant to be a commercial that fits into the bucket just like a 22-minute show does. And there's so many ways to do it. It is easier on a digital platform or OTT and stuff like that than it was or currently is in traditional television, but I think there's definitely a way to get there. I mean, if you look back when cable first came around, cable, that's not going to do anything. And, you know, you have to hop on board. This is the way. You can't stop Snapchat. You can't stop Twitter. You can't stop Facebook. You can't stop YouTube. So get involved with it and make the best of it and do the things that are going to stand out and not necessarily have to fit you into that silo that was media buying 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, if you look at the world of advertising, it's changing dramatically. On the digital side, you have, you know, programmatic going off the roof. You have, you know, sort of highly specialized piece of content, branded, and I think that will continue to grow. I think there's a great opportunity. I think for television, it's the reality. This thing's getting disrupted. A lot of these channels are going to go away. I think that what you're going to see is a far more leveled playing field. I think we're moving into a world where it's not channels on a cable subscriber, it's actually just apps on whatever screen you're using that day. And so I think you're going to have a far more leveled playing field, and I think the best content producers, the people that can create those brands that generate loyalty, which you're right, it's a much harder thing to do all the time. The offerings are out there, and I think there's the brands that can do that are going to win.
So since you have the mic, continue. One takeaway for the audience about the digital native generation.
It's change coming. The habits are changing dramatically. As a media company, you just have to embrace it. And as you said, be where they are. You have to get in front of them.
Oh, I was the same thing. Okay. I'll keep it short.
I would just say that technology will continually change, and that will change the possibilities. And so understanding kind of where different groups and motivations and attitudes and mindsets are coming from and how they were developed will help you emphasize what aspects of that are most relevant.
For this audience, I think you have to remember it's a two-way conversation. No one's just sitting at their couch watching the trough of content you shove at them. They're really interactive. They create their own content. They talk back. So that's the most important thing you need to remember.
Yeah, and I think this is a situation where the audience, where the viewers are kind of already there, and the business model needs to quickly evolve to catch up. And so there's no kind of if, it's definitely is happening now, and it's happening really, really fast. And I think the sooner we sort of all embrace that, I think it'll be great for the industry and obviously great for consumers as well.
I would say whether it's producing great content or targeting advertising across, over the top or any platform, really, interest and behavioral segmentation is really the future. Being able to understand what your audience actually wants. I think people are going to realize more and more it's 10 times more important than just simple demographics.
All right, thank you, panel. Thank you, everybody.